Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Legionaries of Christ, and I teach theology. This is a podcast on the StarCast Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 263, recovering Ad Gentes, the document on the mission of the church, the missionary activity of the church. We're covering paragraph 27 on collaboration in missionary work. We need to mission as a group, not as just as an individual. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday we spoke about how missionaries need to understand both the faith and the culture where they are sent so they can present the faith to the people in that culture. Today, we're going to conclude Chapter 4 on missionaries, and the summary is missionary is not an individual endeavor, but done in groups, often communities or institutes of religious life, secular institutes, societies of apostolic life that were built around such a task. So paragraph 27 has 4 subparagraphs. A is over half of the paragraph, so we're going to read it alone, and then B through D. So A is about missions are done in teams, not individually. And B to D, these groups take on key tasks in missions. So let's begin with 27A. A, all these things, though necessary for everyone who is sent to the nations, can seriously be attained to in reality by individual missionaries. Since even mission work itself, as experience teaches, cannot be accomplished by lone individuals, a common calling has gathered these individuals together into institutes, in which, with united efforts, they are promptly trained and might carry out this work in the name of the church and under the direction of the hierarchy. For many centuries, these institutes have borne the burden of the day and the heat, devoting themselves to missionary labor, either entirely or in part. Often vast territories were committed to them by the Holy See for evangelization, and there they gathered together a new people of God, a local church, clinging to their own shepherds. With their zeal and experience, they will serve, by fraternal cooperation, either in the care of souls or in rendering special services for the common good, those churches which were founded at the cost of their sweat and even their blood. So before we do a little analysis of this term institutes here is referring to some group. The most common would be a religious congregation, like my own Legionaries of Christ, the Jesuits, or the Maryknoll missionaries, or etc. There's a whole bunch of them. But there can also be what are called secular institutes or societies of apostolic life. The exact distinction is not super important here. We've covered that in religious life, Perfecta Caritatis. But the idea is you have this group of people who are working together in the mission, whether they be religious or otherwise, and even between institutions, because you might have one institute who runs schools, another who runs a hospital, another who preaches, and all three of those are working in some town where there is a mission to bring the gospel to that city or that town. So that's important. And here we need a whole team. This is a big project. Evangelization is not something that like, woohoo, I go home and I go do it in the afternoon. No, it's a huge project taking decades or centuries, taking many, many people. And so we need that. And often we have different skills. I know myself, I am good at teaching theology. Hopefully I'm good at explaining here. I'm good at teaching it to seminarians, things like that. I am not the best social butterfly type priest. I would say there are many priests who are much better at the kind of social aspect of being a priest and socializing with people in the parish, things like that, than I am. I don't try and be like bad at it, but I know it's not my forte. Where other priests can do that. And the same thing with mission. You're going to have the ones who's going to get the intellectual, the other one who's going to help out and provide a hospital, the other one who's going to do this and that, right? So that's important. And so we should often gather together. We should often work together. And there's this long history in the church of all these different missionary activities, different missionary institutes, religious congregations dedicated to missions, dedicated to do things like that. We think of Mother Teresa and her missionaries of charity. They're still missionaries. They're working for the poor. But Mother Teresa herself had joined a community that was missionary originally, and they were teachers. And that's how she got to Calcutta, is she was sent by her community in Europe to Calcutta to teach in a school. And she was teaching there for, I think, like 2 decades or so before she felt the call to found the Missionaries of Charity. So that is where we have it, right? So that gives us that idea. They are in there doing this missionary work in India by running a school or things like that. And so this this is important, and we do this in fraternal cooperation. We cooperate as brothers. Fraternal just means brotherly, but in this sense, it can also mean siblingly or things like that. We don't really, siblingly is probably not technically an English word, but brotherly in that sense, not in the male-only sense. And we often have other institutes to collaborate in the various different things, like I said, because not only individuals have special skills, different institutes focus on different things. And so they can do that. And we have seen how the Holy Spirit, through these institutes, has evangelized whole regions. They've founded new churches. The missionaries have given their sweat and their blood, and that has built up these new churches. So moving on to the other three subparagraphs, B through D, these groups take on key tasks in the missions. Let's read them. B, sometimes throughout the entire extent of some region, they will take certain tasks upon themselves. For example, the evangelization of groups of peoples who perhaps for such a reason have not accepted the gospel measure or have thus far resisted it. C, if need be, let them be on hand to help and train out of their own experience those who will devote themselves to mission activity for a time. D, for these reasons, and since there are many nations to be led to Christ, the institutes remain extremely necessary. So let's go through these three subparagraphs individually. B talks about certain subfields with the mission will have certain groups, and they'll dedicate themselves to that. For example, we interviewed the priest with Glenmary, I think Father Anthony, if my memory's going right at the beginning, and he talked about how they focus on going into places that are less than 0.5% Catholic in the county and building up a church there in the United States. Now, in the United States, we don't think the United States is no longer a mission field. I'm in Connecticut, and I don't know the exact percentage, but I think 40% of the population is Catholic here in Connecticut. And so it's not like, nobody knows the gospel here. We have obvious issues with people being not practicing Catholics and things like that, but that's an issue. That's a different issue from a first evangelization. And so they do things like that, and those other communities do different things. I know the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, the OMI in Canada, did a lot to reach out and go to all the different native tribes in Canada, and they learned Cree and different languages like that, and they really evangelized them. In Canada, the majority of the native peoples are Catholic. Even though you would not think that, you might think a bunch of them are still practicing native faith. No, the majority of them are Catholic, and the main group that evangelized them was the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, the OMIs. And so they took on that specific mission. That's an important thing that different communities can do. Now, talking about C is talking about, hey, we hand on a trade. We need to learn from others, right? So we don't just go into a new mission field. Let's just start from scratch. No, let's learn from those who are there. Those who are there, let's teach the others, and then acculturation. And then D just says, hey, we still need these institutes. We still need these religious communities. And they're even more important because they need so many other nations we discovered, and we need to send them to all these different nations, and we need all these different communities to do that. So thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarQuest produce it and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time monthly to join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow we're going to continue with the next paragraphs of Ad Gentes 28-29 on each proclaims according to their gift, which starts chapter 5. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on the podcast, such as playlists for individual documents and a reading plan. Amen.